What's up, you guys? I'm Dan. This is Frugal Not Cheap. This week we're going to look at credit cards from Citi. There are some that usually don't get a whole lot of love, but actually I think you can make some pretty solid setups using these cards. So that's what we're going to look at in today's video. Hey guys, so I've done a bunch of reviews on cards from Chase, also CapitalOne and American Express. These tend to get a whole lot of love, but actually Citi is a bit underrated, I think, in a way. I did one video on the Citi Strata Elite, more on that later, but really not a whole lot of content on Citi. So I wanted to look at, is there a viable strategy that we can put together using cards from Citi? And I think there is, especially for people that are based in the US. This is a strategy that is not as good for people based overseas because there are foreign transaction fees on the no annual fee credit card. So something to keep in mind, but for those of you that are based in the US, I think they could be really, really solid. Let's check it out. So really the foundation of this kind of Citi setup, I think, is going to be the Double Cash card. I've had one of these cards for many, many years. I guess the marketing is that, you get 1% when you spend and then 1% when you pay off the balance. I always pay the balance off every single month. You should be doing that as well, not carrying any debt. There's no reason to pay any interest in order to get a better credit score. That's a common myth that's out there. Anyway, so I think it's a solid card. You've got no annual fee. Again, there are foreign transaction fees, but it's just a great way to get 2% cash back on all your spend. On top of that, you can get a little bit of perks on travel. You get an additional 3% back on hotels, rental cars, and attractions that are booked on the travel portal. So that brings you up to 5% on those and then 2% on everything else. So I put that into a spreadsheet here. And as with all the spreadsheets, you can just look in the description for the video. There's a resources link. Open that up and it'll give you a folder with all the different sheets that I've put together over the years. This one is called Solid Credit Card Setups with Citi, and there you can do all the math and see if any of these cards are going to make sense for you. Anyway, my spending outside of rent back in Texas was about $11,350 a year. Of that, I'm saying about $1,000 or so could go into that 5% category. That's going to get us $50 in points. And then the other $10,350 would make another $207 in cash back. So overall, we have a net positive value of $257 just using this one card, the Citi Double Cash. However, of course, we can do better by building out the system. So let's add one more card, and that's going to be the Citi Custom Cash. The way the Custom Cash card works is you get 5% back on your top spending category for the month. So this category can change, and Citi will kind of determine which one was the top one. I've got a list of categories here, but it's pretty extensive, and as long as you're careful about just picking this card up whenever you do that particular thing, let's say it's going to be restaurants, then you'll be able to add quite a bit of value. So here we're doing that. We're using restaurants. So I've still got the $50 in points from the portal using the Double Cash card, but now I'm spending $2,000 a year on restaurants. That's going to net us another $100. And then on the remainder of the spending, the $83.50, we're going to earn $167. So we've improved our value proposition now from $257 to $317, which is pretty significant. Now, there was kind of a cheat code with this card back in the day. You're only allowed to have one custom cash card now. In the old days, there was a way to have multiple custom cash cards and thereby get the 5% back on multiple spending categories in the month by using different cards for different purposes, different categories. But Citi has cracked down on that. And if I didn't make it clear, there is a cap per month on the amount that you get 5% back on the card. So you do want to be careful about that. That cap is $500. So you want to spend up to $500 on that category on that card, and then you go back to using the Double Cash card because that'll give you 2% on everything, whereas the Custom Cash would only give you 1% on the spending outside that top category. So also very important to be careful to only use that Custom Cash card for that one particular category. All right, so that's pretty good, and I think this is a pretty solid no annual fee cashback setup, which I think is increasingly popular given the fact that a lot of the premium cards have now become really big coupon books and rather unwieldy and difficult. I've got a video on that here. However, Citi does have some pretty solid cards in kind of the mid-tier and premium category. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add on the Citi Strata Premier card. This is a $95 annual fee kind of mid-tier card that offers some pretty good perks, but as long as your consumption patterns are really specifically matched to this card, then I think it it does provide a really solid value. So of course, we're going to get larger multipliers using this card on travel related stuff. It is kind of a mid-tier, travel card. We're going to get 10% back now instead of the 5% on hotels, car rentals, and attractions booked through the Citi portal. I estimate that's about $1,000 in spend for me, or $100 in points. We're also going to get 3% now on air travel and hotels booked through the portal. Other cards offer higher multipliers, but anyway, this is something we didn't have in the previous setup, so it is a bonus. On $2,000 worth of spend, that's going to be 60 bucks. Then we also get 3% back on restaurants. So that's welcome. I estimate about $2,000 a year in spend for another $60 right there. And finally, it also provides an increased multiplier on gasoline and EV charging stations. So that's going to be really good for a lot of people that aren't working from home. With $1,800 a year in spend, I'd estimate about $54 in cash back. Now, this doesn't reflect my actual usage patterns. When I lived in the States, I had an EV and I plugged it into my garage every day. So not really, but I remember when I was driving, I was spending around 160, 200 bucks a month or so. So I think that's reasonable. Okay, now we're going to move our custom cash category over to groceries rather than restaurants, because again, we're getting 3% back on restaurants from the Premier card. And my annual spend on groceries was about 2,500 bucks. So that's another $125 in points at that 5% back rate. And then finally, we've only got about $2,000 left to put on the Double Cash card, but that's still going to earn us another $41. So we've got total points now of $440 a year. That's definitely enough to cover the $95 annual fee, but the great part is there's a hotel benefit. That's 100 bucks a year. Now, this is, again, very specific. You've got to spend at least $500 on a single stay once per calendar year in order to get it. But as long as you're doing that, it's kind of a no-brainer. In other words, this is kind of a keeper card, or definitely has positive value, as long as you do that every single year. With that, total gross value is $540, less that $95 annual fee, and we've got $445 in value from this setup. Again, that's up from $317 with the two-card setup, and $257 with the single Double Cash setup. So this trifecta is definitely giving us increased value. Can we do even better? Well, I do believe that we can, but again, this is going to be very specific. Especially for those of you that aren't too keen on having a mid-tier travel card, you really want to have like lounge access and all those great travel protections, higher multipliers, that kind of thing. And then of course, the trifecta we can set up here is to swap out the Premier with the Elite. So looking at the Citi Strata Elite card, this is again more premium card. We're looking at a $595 annual fee, pretty hefty. But of course, in return, we're going to get larger multipliers on our spend. For the hotels, car rentals, and attractions, we're now actually going to get 12%. On $1,000, that's going to be $120 in points. Air travel and hotel gets doubled from 3% to 6%, meaning we now get $120 in points here as well. And then restaurants become a little bit more complicated, but useful. So they have this thing called Citi Nights. It's Friday and Saturday from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Any spend that you log in during that time is going to earn you 6%. And then any restaurant spending outside of that is going to go back to the 3% rate that we already had with the Citi Strata Premier. But in any case, most of the time going out, you're probably going to be doing weekends. Friday and Saturday night's a good one to do that. So on $1,000 worth of spend, of course, that's 60 bucks. And then with the other 1,000 in restaurants, that's another 30. Then we've got our 2,500 in groceries on the Citi Custom Cash and the rest on Double Cash. And we end up with total points now of $532. Now that's not enough to cover that $595 annual fee, but there are other perks. There is an annual hotel benefit of $300. You do have to spend 2 nights or more, so that's a bit of a downer. Still though, I think that's doable. I'll value that at face value. And on the spreadsheet, by the way, if you do download a copy of it for yourself, you can change these multipliers here, and so you can discount these different credits in order to kind of match what you believe they actually are valuable to you. Anyway, so that's $300 in value for me. And then we have this annual splurge, Best Buy, First Dibs, Live Nation, all this other stuff. Your mileage may vary. Maybe this is something useful for you. I don't really value it at all, so that's a 0 for me. And the same is true for the annual Black Lane credit. You get two kind of $50 credits, but Black Lane is actually pretty expensive, so I just don't think this is really worth it. Anyway, if you want more detail on these credits, do check out my review of the Citi Strata Elite. There's a lot more detail there. I'm going to kind of run through it relatively quickly, but that's going to be another goose egg for me. What will give us some value, though, is going to be Priority Pass. I value this at 50 cents on the dollar. It's 175 bucks. I really do, especially traveling internationally, find that the lounge access really elevates the travel experience quite a bit. Yes, they are more crowded nowadays because a lot of people have these cards, but still worthwhile in my book. One of the best things is definitely taking a shower after a 12-hour flight before you're on to connecting flight so you can arrive nice and fresh. Then we also get 4 sort of lounge passes to the American Airlines Admirals Club. I think for those of you based stateside, this could be more important. And back when I was in DFW, that would have been worthwhile as well. I don't think that those 4 visits are really worth $300, but let's value them at 50 cents on the dollar. And so that's going to be another $150. And then finally, we've also got global entry. I value this also at 50 cents on the dollar, so that's $10 a year. Basically makes entering the US a whole lot more convenient, but it's not really that big of a deal. It is kind of nice. Okay, so total face value on all these credits is $1,370, but the actual value to me is more like $635. Still, just the value from those credits is more than enough to compensate for the annual fee. Plus, we add in the $532 in points, and we've got $1,167 in value. Less the annual fee, and we're at $572, so doing better than with the trifecta with the Citi Strata Premier. Now, things can get even better if you have assets with Citi. If you've got a Citi Gold relationship where you have at least $200,000 parked with them, this can be in an investment account, then you get a credit. I think the first year is free, and then after that you get $145 off of your Citi Strata Elite annual fee, which is pretty awesome. So I'm going to look at it for the steady state. So that's going to cut down that annual fee by $145, which means the value proposition has increased now to $717 in the black, making this a pretty strong contender. So yeah, I think this Citi trifecta is a pretty solid credit card setup, either the Citi Strata Premier one or the Citi Strata Elite one, as long as you meet those specific criteria for the hotel spending and then also for the Citi Gold relationship. But given those criteria, they are pretty sweet. Now again, they're not any good for me living here in Thailand because the no annual fee cards have foreign transaction fees, and a lot of the perks are really more US specific, so is the spend that I put in here. But for those of you living in the States, hopefully this video will help you out and give you another option to consider. Again, download the spreadsheet, do the math for yourself, and see if it makes sense. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button, consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.